Remove carcinogens and get your gear compliant clean with Unimac laundry equipment. Find it at alliancelaundry.com/fire.
All right, hey, what's up, guys? Welcome here to Firefighter Nation. My name's John Velez. I run the Tailboard Misfits podcast. I'm here with Preston. Preston, what's going on, man?
Oh, man, feeling real good. It's nice to get back behind the mic. I've taken a little bit of a break, but always good to be in a room with good people, virtual room, that is.
Yeah, same here, dude. I've been relatively quiet. And we were talking before this, so I just want to throw this out there. Although the episodes haven't been out for a year, Preston and I have managed to not get fired from Firefighter Nation for a year now because we have been recording episodes for Firefighter Nation for a solid year. And so really, I just want to applaud us for not getting ourselves fired or getting anybody in trouble and getting a bad name for ourselves so far.
Yeah, I mean, they scraped the bottom of the barrel when they started off. So they haven't found better replacements for us yet, but I'm sure it's coming at some point.
Waiting for the email. Dude, so I'm excited for today. We have Chief Mark Aloan. Chief, we're super excited to have you. I know Preston and you kind of have been knowing each other for a while, but I had the pleasure of meeting you down at FDIC this last year. And we had some really good conversations, in the bar and everything like that following your episode on the weekly scrap, and it was awesome. So I knew we were going to get together at some point, and I'm glad we got to make it happen here pretty quickly.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to be here. So I'll apologize in advance. My dog's on the ground here. So if anything moves in a 13-mile radius, you might get some loud, aggressive barking. But other than that, we should be good to go.
Yeah,
it's okay.
You know what's funny, though, man, is I reached out to Mark after his episode on the scrap as well. That was the first time we had a conversation, and we linked up at FDIC, and we went to Buffalo Wild Wings with Sean Duffy and his family, and him and I got to sit next to each other and created a bromance. So we talked to each other like we've known each other for a long time, but we just had a very intimate moment, and we've been growing together ever since.
Yeah, it's funny though, man, because I don't have that's all I have. I don't have people that I just kind of know, or I either don't really know you, I'll recognize your face, your name, or I know you. I don't really have it in between. You're either at arm's length or you're not. I don't know how to do it another way. So
I feel like that's the beauty of the fire service, though. It's just Preston and I were talking about this, a while back. Is we've been chatting on the phone and FaceTiming and podcasting together for a while, and the first time we got to meet in person was FDIC. And you would picture this huge intimate moment where we just kind of maybe slowly embraced each other, oh my God, it's so finally nice to meet you. And it wasn't that way at all. It's hey, what's up, dude? Hey, what's up? All right, let's keep going.
Where are we going?
No big deal. So
you didn't look like strangers on your podcast couch over there at Lucas Oil. So you look like you've been doing it for a while. So mission success, right?
Yeah. So before we get started, and Preston does this on his podcast, and we really like to do it here. Chief, if you don't mind, man, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your family, because, we all know it at the end of the day, family's important and family comes first. So why don't you give them a quick shout out and introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Mark Aloan. I'm a battalion chief with the West Columbia Fire Department in South Carolina. We're literally across the river from regular Columbia, South Carolina, as I call it. But I was born and raised in upstate New York, started volunteering when I was 17 years old. Was in school to be a paramedic, realized that I was not mature enough for college at 18, and my grades suffered. My dad was in the Army growing up, so I did the only good thing an Army brat could do, and I joined the Air Force and got to do signals intelligence, which is not as appealing as it may sound. You're not James Bond, like my recruiter told me. So did that for 4 years. It fully intended to be a lifer in the military, if we're being honest, and just try to volunteer when I went around places. But I ended up down here in Georgia, volunteered for the department here in Columbia County, got picked up by them career in '07, which allowed me to separate. And then in 2019, I took a lateral up to West Columbia, where I am now as a captain. And I want to say been a battalion chief for about 2 years, 2.5 years now. And that's that side of it. In between all that, I started doing some writing and some blogging, and that led to teaching and conferences and podcasting. And, as my wife likes to say all the time, oh, you're a celebrity now. We go somewhere and somebody in every state knows you. And I don't see it that way. I'm just a fireman who likes to run my mouth like everybody else. But yeah, my wife, Ashley, she does mortgages for a living. She's way more important than I am. She gives people houses, essentially, is how I look at it. We have two awesome daughters, Caitlin and Allison. They're getting ready to start their summer break here, so this will kind of be my last big thing. I think we're about to go on family vacation. Then I'm off to Great Lakes Hot in Michigan and the Fire Inside Conference down in Texas with Firefighter Air Coalition. So busy summer, busy June, and this is just a good way to get it started off. So again, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, the Fire Inside, that one, I want to go to that so bad. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to swing it, but it's not too far from me. I mean,
We sneak you in.
yeah, I live like maybe an hour and a half or so from it's in the Metroplex, like Grapevine or something.
Yeah, it's like dead between. It's like 30 minutes south of DFW, I think.
Yeah,
I remember the map. Which I went to Air Force School in San Angelo, so I know like you can go somewhere else in Texas, but it takes you till tomorrow to get there, and you need a passport. So
yep. No, that's awesome. I want to try to get out there to one of those, the Fire Inside or whatever it is. I want to get out there to that one, but I don't know if I'll be able to make it. So. Okay, you kind of set us some topics and we want to kick it off, and we're going to let you ramble, and then obviously Preston and I will jump in whenever. So you sent us rewards without the work. Let's talk about that for a bit and let you expand on it.
Yeah, so I think what I realized, and again, everything I talk about is just something I learned the hard way. It's not like I'm some kind of messiah of leadership and culture or anything. It's all making questionable moves at times, or doing things I was naive about. But I kind of noticed a trend, and it started with me, if we're being honest. When I first came on the fire department as a volunteer, right, I had some very good mentors, just didn't know it at the time, that kind of set me up the right way. And so I can go into it all the way back then, being 17, 18, 19 years old on a day crew as a volunteer. And we'd have like a retired guy who was probably a past chief or something driving the rig, and it'd be a bunch of college kids and high school kids running the rig during the day. So I can vividly remember going to a car wreck one day, and his car's up in a snowbank, and I'm like, oh my God, they're entrapped. We're going to cut the car open, and I'm riding the officer's seat, and I think I'm something else because I got to do the woo-woos, and I got to tell them we were there. And I remember popping his door open, and our chief showed up, and he walks up to the opposite door on the opposite side of the car and just opens it with his hand. He's like, why don't you check all the doors next time? And that stuck with me, right? Because that was kind of the day I realized that, I thought sitting in that seat made me somebody. I thought it made me in charge. And in reality, it was this poor, past chief who's retired. Now he's raising his second set of kids at the firehouse, trying to keep us from tearing things up and breaking things down. So, fast forward, and I continue to make those mistakes like any young fireman does, where I kind of thought I was a little better at the job than I was. And, I cite this all the time. I go back to the first time I got a helmet cam, and I watched a fire I had gone to where it took me like a minute 40 in the front yard to get my mask and my gloves on and be ready to go. And I'm like, man, I'm not really good at this job, but I think I am, and I talk like I am. And that's where I went back down this path of you really have to earn it. And I was very fortunate that time in my career kind of coincided with some good people around me who pointed me in the right direction, who got me to some outside trainings, got to see kind of the bigger picture and where I lacked and where I didn't. That's where I learned, like, people don't want to hear you run your mouth per se. They, you get to do that as a reward sometimes for the work, but people just want to see you come and do the work. And that's what you're really getting graded on. And people talk about it all the time. There's however many people in your fire department, and how many of them are actually doing the work. I mean, you can cite crews in your department, crews in your neighboring department when you show up. And I think to come full circle, as I became a battalion chief, that really resonates with me, because I'm looking at who's at the window, right? Who's in the yard. Like, I know who the go-getters are and who they aren't. And fortunately for me, I don't really have a lot around me that aren't go-getters, but if that's who you are, you're going to get work with me as your IC. That's who I want. If I have an assignment, it's usually the same people, unless they're dog tired. So, but when you translate that, we talked about culture, right? We translate that to the fire department. I think there's a lot of people that associate the stickers and the patches and the logos and in the flags and all this swag that we put everywhere, but that's not culture. That's the reward of culture. That's from the blood, sweat, and tears of fighting it out and being into the job and getting results. And I think with social media and just as fast as somebody can put out a 10-second TikTok or, a meme about something now, it's not as easy as just showing up to a fire department or a fire station or a shift or however you want to slice it and dice it. But you don't just show up one day and like, hey, let's make a challenge coin and all of a sudden we're going to be squared away. Those logos, those sayings, those mentalities come from jobs well done to a point, but usually from jobs that didn't go well, where we learned about each other, and it's just it's a chemistry thing to me. So, I think if I could pump the brakes on one thing in the fire service right now, it would just be letting people know that culture builds organically. I love Duffy's thing, right? Build your culture. Like, that's the message. It's not buy your culture, it's build your culture. And if you're not willing to do the work, then you don't deserve it, in my opinion. But there's a lot of people that'll let those 3, 4, 5, 6 people in the department do all the work, and then they want to get all the rewards for it. And then we wonder why things don't go as smooth, or why our department isn't trending in the direction we want it to.
You brought up some really interesting points there, and like for me, the whole culture thing, like you're right. I think some of the best cultures that I've seen and been around, even in my own department, is it didn't just come from making a cool logo or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's through guys' hard work and their equity that they put into the job. And a lot of times, you do see, I think it comes into like a bigger conversation, because especially as the newer generation of firemen get around, and I had this conversation the other day, like they're so used to just being able to hop on the internet and share something, right, and get like this instant feedback from it. They're able to hop on there and, like you said, post a meme or a cool video, and they'll get likes and comments immediately. And they try to translate that into the firehouse, right? And it doesn't really work that way. Not saying that's right, wrong, or indifferent. It just doesn't work that way. Changing in culture and establishing that culture and building that culture, like it takes time. And I think where a lot of people go wrong, at least in my opinion and in my experiences, has been they try to flip it like that. It's a light switch, right? They say one day they want to have a good culture, and they just try to walk over to the light switch and turn it on. And they order t-shirts and stickers, and they think that's going to fix it. And realistically, that's not it at all. And so I just had to say that because it was a really good point. It made me think like, no, that's completely right.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things I've heard for it, and I'm horrible about where I heard things, so don't ask me to quote people in books and stuff. I'm not that guy. I just keep loose change up in this brain. But the saying was, sometimes you have to set the table for somebody else to eat. And that's what we don't understand in the fire service anymore, is that the things that I'm doing in my fire department today, I may never experience the rewards from it. The culture may shift after I move, right? Or even if you get down to like a promotion, right? Like my promotion took me off the truck, for the most part, into the buggy. So things that I was pushing for when I was assigned to the engine are now starting to come around. We're starting to experience them a little bit. And I will never experience them firsthand as a company officer, even though they were things that I worked on or tried to promote or tried to, plant seeds for. And that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's sometimes where we get confused on the legacy speech. Legacy is not the Hall of Fame. It's not your picture on the wall. It's not your name somewhere. Legacy is the things that you did that grabbed hold or changed the direction of the organization or your company or an individual even, right? That's your legacy. And people don't understand that part of legacy is you don't always get to experience it. And that's, I think if we could come to terms with that a little bit, maybe it would be easier to stomach. But especially with the younger guys, like, I was actually having this conversation with a very good mentor of mine, Rick Dunn, who's was the chief, works for the South Carolina Firefighters Association now. But I asked him, I said, man, I'm embarrassed to tell you that this far in my career, like, I don't know where the hours come from for classes. Like, what makes a 40-hour class? What makes an 80-hour class? What makes 16 hours of training for ISO? And we're in the middle of this conversation because I kept getting calls, but I think that's part of the issue is we've tried to add some value to the profession through certification and credentialing and things that are supposed to, professionalize us, I guess, for a better word, which would equal, more pay and make us more like other industries. I think we've also created unintentionally a situation where, especially with the younger guys, that if there's 1 hour of hose advancement required in their syllabus, then they think 1 hour of hose advancement is enough. When in reality, you need to A, train till you can't, get it wrong or till you stop getting wrong, but B, like that maintenance training. It's just like sports. Like just because you go to the World Series doesn't mean you don't take batting practice next year. If anything, you take more batting practice to stay at that level. So that's it's a lot to take in. It's a lot for a very small word, but it doesn't matter how you slice it. Culture, it's personal skill, it's policy and procedure, it's incident command, it's training. If you don't want to do the work, you're not going to get the true rewards, which is performance. Yeah. That's what it all comes down to.
I tell you what, that's one thing that I think about a lot, and especially for the three of us that have some kind of platform, or we travel and we speak, or we are on a podcast. And John and I have had this realization that the things we say actually mean a lot. There are people that are listening and taking our topics, our conversation, and they're going back to their firehouse and talking about these things. So there's a lot of responsibility behind the things that you say. But then you also started this podcast. So like, you're just a firefighter that likes to talk, right? That inherently, I think you got the wake up call maybe sooner than some people do about the work, because I love to talk too, right? I go to a conference, I like to come back and blab my mouth about all the things that I learned. But you know what that does? That draws the attention of critics or people that may be skeptical of you. And if you spent that minute and a half in the front yard masking up, what does that do? It gives ammunition to those people. So if you are not doing the work and you're over here chirping away, you are going to get humbled real quick. And I think everyone needs to get humbled, because I've been humbled, and that has made me take more action in my skill set. It makes me want to go get more education and put it into work. And then, like you talked about with legacy, I don't need my name on a wall. I would love to just, when I retire, the generations before me say, hey, I learned this maneuver from Preston, or whatever line, like Firefighter Lions, Chief Lions, whatever I am when I retire. Like, that's a great legacy to have. I don't need books. I don't need names on the wall. But if the generation before me is better and it's saving lives because of it, I'm good with that.
Yeah. And it's funny you talk about that. We just got back from Metro Atlanta conference. I went down there. I teach with a cadre on Rust Belt Jakes, and one of these young cats that we had in our class, when we were doing our little review afterwards, he kind of said, he's like, yeah, I got a lot out of it, and specifically, something, he showed me and he pointed at me about advanced hose, and I'm just like I still don't get that, right? Like, I've been doing this a long time now, and it doesn't seem like it, but like I still have trouble accepting when somebody, like you said, right, when they're talking about, oh, you taught me that, or, oh, look, that's Mark, because like you said, we have a voice, and like I still, like, I'm probably the worst about realizing that sometimes. Like, I let myself say things and I don't realize that some people will take that to the bank, because I do have a platform. I'll loosely say some credibility within the industry now, right? Not as much as some other people do, but it's Corley, I know, has said it multiple times on the scrap. I've said it. I can point to pretty much anybody in my core circle has the same story, which is that the reason we appreciate the work is because there was a period in our career where we did not. And then, like you said, something happened and we started to understand. Like, most people don't show up on day one committed to 20, 25 years of grinding it out. They show up because, it's a cool job. They want to be on it. They're going to be who they're around. And if they're not around people like that, eventually they will run a call and they will get exposed, whether they like it or not. And they have a crossroads. You either say, hey, that's fine, whatever, it just went wrong today, I accept it. Or you say, hey, I need to do better. And they go down this other path, which is where we're trying to push more people down these days with these platforms and these conversations.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking about one of the things you were talking about, like you not being able to reap the benefits of the work, or that you had put in as a company officer or whatever it is. Yeah. And like, I know, like, us as human beings, we are very selfish natured. Like, we want it for us. That's our flesh though, right? And I think as a leader and as you grow and mature, just as a person in general, it starts to become more okay. And myself included, right? Like, I want to push, and I'm just going to throw an example out there. Like, I want to push this specific hose load because it benefits me, right? And I think once we could take ourselves out of the picture, then I could think we can fight the good fight, if you will, from a better stance, right? That it doesn't matter about me. It matters about the guys and the people that we're serving, right? And I think a lot of people, realistically, if they could take a step back and have that approach that you've come to realize is like, hey, like, I might not benefit from this, and that's okay. What I really think it does is it changes our approach, because when we want it for selfish reasons, like we can start getting a little emotional driven, right? Because we want to see it happen and we want to see it happen now. And it kind of goes back to like another conversation Preston and I had is like, whenever we're presenting this information, a lot of times it's for change in the way that we're doing something currently, right? And at the end of the day, in my opinion, at this point, nothing in the fire service is proprietary. Like we didn't come up with anything. But if we can give credibility away to other people, what it does is it adds credibility to what we're saying. If we can say that, Lieutenant Ray McCormack taught me this, like that adds credibility to what we are saying because it's not coming from John Velez. It's not coming from Preston Lyons. Like it's coming from someone else that it'll work for us. And I think like once we can kind of realize that we don't have to take credit for that, and it's okay that if future generations benefit from this, because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for, is right to leave it better than we found it. Like we could be a lot better. And I think that's the biggest thing really is just like taking the selfish desires out of it to be able to present it and have that, I don't even want to call it an argument, but that conversation from a better stance whenever we're not emotionally charged from it. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
No, it does. And, I think you have to be selfish to a point. And that's part of the problem with the fire service is that we teach people that are into it to be overly humble and then they get passed up for things. And so I think you have to be selfish at certain points to put yourself in a position to be selfish for us, right? You have to be selfish for you to get in a position to make the decisions, to have either the authority or the influence or the sway or whatever you want to call it, to be selfish for everybody on the fire ground. And sometimes you are being selfish for everybody on the fire ground. You're pushing for something that some people either don't understand, they don't know it's good for them, they don't like it. But I think you kind of hit on it in the beginning too. As you move up, that becomes a little easier because like now I'm selfish for the guys on my shift. Like there are things that I want for sure for me. Like I like what things a certain way in the firehouse, but now like 90% of what I'm advocating for as a battalion chief is for the benefit of my guys. It's what they want. I've reached a point where what kind of makes sense to me now is I'm about outcomes. Like there is a lot of ways to do this job. There are certain ways that work better than other ways. There are ways that work for John. There are ways that work for Preston that don't work for Mark and vice versa. So I'm about outcomes now. So look, if you want to go, I'm Minuteman until I die, right? I will ride that horse forever. That is my hose load. You will not convince me otherwise. Like, I don't know. I shouldn't say never, right? But at this point in my career, like I'll put that up against anything. But if you want to get off the rig and you want to throw all the hose on the ground and you want to grab a couple of nozzles and run away because that's your go-to. Hey, if we're hitting the benchmark and you're flaked at the door, ready to rock in the same time frame, I don't care, right? Because that's not my position anymore. My position is like, did we hit the benchmarks? Are we making the outcome? Just because you like vertical ventilation doesn't mean that there aren't times where horizontal ventilation doesn't solve the problem, which is, lift, exhaust heat, make things more tenable for victims and search crews. So we die on these hills of how, and instead of just trying to get to what are we trying to accomplish. And I think that ties back to the selfish thing is that don't be selfish about what is happening, right? Be selfish about where we're going, what the destination is. As long as we get there, that's what matters. It's when we start doing things that don't bring us to that outcome where we need to start intervening and kind of pushing people in a different direction.
Yeah, I think selfish is another word, especially when you're talking about outcomes. You're being selfish in the commitment because everybody has a goal, right? I could have a goal next New Year's resolution to get a 6-pack. Everybody has a goal to lose weight, something like that.
Talking like beer or stomach here.
All right. Well, yeah, absolutely. 6-pack of beer. But the problem is people don't commit to those goals, or they don't know. They have a vision, but they don't know how to achieve that vision. And when you become selfish or you become like consumed with achieving this outcome for your organization and for the people that work and ride the rigs with you, you become very eager in achieving those milestones. Like you said, like if this is our goal, we need to hit these markers all the way through, and you can invest a lot of your time and energy into it. And like you said, if you could be too humble where it's like, oh, well, we tried. What? No, like this is the goal. This is what we're going to stick to. We got to commit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think too, with the experience and the maturity just kind of comes the understanding that, 5-year firefighter Mark the destination that I thought I wanted to go maybe isn't the destination that, 20 years on Mark wants to go to now, because I've learned things. And I would argue that while a lot of me has not changed over the years, a lot of me has at the same time. And I'm actually, at this point in my career, I am much more apprehensive to get involved with people who haven't changed their position on a few things as they've grown in their career, because if they haven't, unless they're in some unicorn fire department where everything's gone to plan every time, it means that they're not challenging themselves. They're not challenging their department, their people. They're not challenging their views. And so if you go through an entire career and you're the same firefighter you were coming out of rookie school, that's dangerous to me. I'm not saying everybody like that is bad. What I'm saying is that's a red flag for me to like, hey, tell me your story, because something is not lining up here for me.
Yeah, I feel like it's also like double side. Like there's another side to that coin, because I love what you're saying and everything, like the outcome based thing. And let's just leave it with like, I think because it's easy for all of us as firemen to understand, right? Like you said, the hose load, like deploying the hose to the front door. I think as long as we understand like why we're here to deploy the hose load, right? To be fast and efficient. And like you said, the meeting of benchmarks, because I feel like that's where a lot of people lose it. Like, let's just say the Minuteman, right? It's fast, it's efficient, it's easy to deploy. Like I could teach my daughter how to deploy a Minuteman hose. It's easy, right? And so someone that wants to come in and run, I don't know how to say this without poking any fingers at anybody. So a different hose load, okay? It is okay. Yeah, okay. Whatever you want to call it. If you want to run that, like, it's okay. But I want you to be able to explain to me why. I want you to explain why you want to do it that way. And if it's just simply because you're better at that, well, then that's a different conversation that we can have. But two, as long as they're meeting the benchmark, because I feel like that's where the opposition is going to be at. There's people that would listen to what you just said and argue that's the reason why they want to keep their hose load on the engine.
Yep.
Well, because we're getting
the clock don't lie, man.
Yeah, because we're getting the same outcome. I mean, the nozzle and the coupling are getting to the door, so what's the big deal? But you have to meet the benchmarks of it, right? And I know that's kind of like probably getting off topic of where this started at, but like that's what it was going through my mind. Is like, I don't want people to listen to what you just said and then just be like, take that and run with it, because at the end of the day, like, you have to have those benchmarks and the standards there, because just because something does work doesn't mean it's the best option, right? You have to have those benchmarks to be able to get the same outcome. And yeah, that's
so
what.
Let me throw this thing. I'll throw you this example, and I think maybe it'll highlight it. So I'm a big advocate for masking up with your gloves on. I watched a video the other day of a fire department where they were posting some training, and the guy did not have his gloves on when he masked up. But when I watched the clock, he was under 25 seconds. So again, who cares, right? Gloves on. I can't do that with my gloves off. I can't do it. Now, I don't know if he's giving up dexterity. I don't know if his gloves are bigger. I don't know. But what I know is that watching that video, he is within my benchmark time with his method. So do I want to go after him? And again, it's not anybody from my department. It's somebody on the internet. But do I want to go attack him and say, hey, you're doing it wrong because you need to do it with gloves on because you're not ready to go? Or do I say, hey, bro, keep killing it. You're at the benchmark, like, rock on. Right? Why does that have to be? And that gets into, this, you can only be this way, and you can only be part of this nozzle group or this hose load group or this ladder group. Whatever, man, like, just my new saying, and I hate to say it because I know it'll get turned around on me at some point in my career, but it's only stupid if it doesn't work. Like, that's literally where I'm going as I start aging in the fire service, because why is it stupid? Everything we do, I guarantee you, the first guy that masked up with gloves on was called stupid by the person that watched him. I just guarantee it. So.
The first person that drank milk from a cow was stupid, but is the second person that drank milk from the cow even more stupid? Or
think about all the we go. That's too big of a rabbit hole. I'm not biting on that one.
Man.
So like, and I'm sitting here, and I don't know if it's playing devil's advocate because I halfway believe this. So let's just talk about this at this point. So let's stick with the theme. Let's stick with the mask up theme, okay? Because we do the same thing. I would say culturally in Texas, you come off the rig masked up. Like that's the standard in the state. And I don't want to speak for the entire state because it's huge, but like, especially in my area, that's the standard. You're coming off the rig masked up. Saying that, and I'm going to single it down even further. In my department, I would say the standard is coming off the rig masked up. There's a group of us who believe in the ability to mask up quickly with gloves on, right? But we have a standard. 30 seconds. as long as you're masked up and ready to go in 30 seconds, however you do it, that's okay. What we encourage people to do is if you can't do it in probably 20 or 15 seconds, however, come off the rig masked up because we want you being ready to go. I feel like an argument could be made that says the guy that's doing it in 25 seconds with no gloves on, okay? I feel like an argument could be made saying we can do better than that.
Yeah.
And maybe we should lead them into being able to do it better and quicker. And what I'm saying is like I 100% understand the outcome conversation. Like, yes, congratulations, you met the standard, but I believe that you can do better than that and lead them through that. And that's kind of the same thing, like the hose load, right? And like I said, I'm just sticking with common themes. Like you want to drop the hose on the ground and grab a coupling and a nozzle, okay, but I don't want to leave you there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to just leave you at saying that, no, this works really good for me. I'm just going to throw the hose on the ground and grab a nozzle and coupling and be able to go to the door with it. Yes, it worked. And yes, let's just say, yes, you met the benchmarks, but I don't want to just leave you there because I think that there's a better way at doing these things. Does my argument make sense? Is that what I'm trying to get across?
And there is always going to be a best practice, right? But at some point too, like how many people do we turn off trying to, I think at some point the job has to humble you too. That's the X factor in this entire conversation, right? Mm-hmm. At some point, if you can catch me with dropping the hose on the ground and grabbing brass and a nozzle and going, and you can meet the benchmark that I meet with the Minuteman, at some point, a little landscape fence is going to humiliate you. A car tire is going to humiliate you dragging the hose on the ground. And so eventually you will get humbled. But up until that point, I'm going to have a hard time telling you that, hey, I took 21 seconds and you took 24 seconds, so my way is better. We could sit here and argue seconds all day long. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a hard sell versus now I'm trying to teach you how to do it with your gloves on. And now I moved you from 24 seconds to 54 seconds. And I just lost. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So if you want to associate it to sports, a lot of the great people, man, I don't care what sport you pick, baseball, basketball, football, hockey, whatever you want to pick, some of the greatest athletes, their form is not what we would teach kids in that sport. It's a weird form they develop over time. It only works for them. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work for a lot of other people, and you could try to imitate it. And so that's why I say outcomes. I say at some point you got to have that gray area where people are built different. They have different skills. They're some are stronger, some are taller, some are shorter, some are more flexible, whatever. So outcomes becomes my base, but that doesn't mean I'm giving up on, can we do it better? Is there a better way? Is there a more efficient way? It just means that instead of in the past, I think the starting point was always, let's do it this way, where now my starting point is, this is where we are trying to get. How far away are we from it? And how are we trying to get there? And then we start the process that way. So yeah, I think you're saying it right. I'm just saying, I just flipped the equation around in my head now. I don't care about the way to start with. I care about the outcome, and then we figure out the way on the journey.
There you go. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% agree with what you just said. Sorry.
I have so much more to say on this, but let's go to the next topic, because we could just talk about tactics and times and outcomes all day long. We're just gonna have to do this at next time we get together in person.
I know.
But dude, another topic that John and I both loved that you sent us was the fire service culture versus fire department culture, like how the bigger messages fit into our organizations and the differences with how they play out.
Yeah, so this actually crossed my mind strictly because, we all met each other at FDIC. And I think FDIC is probably one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life, in my career. However, you have to understand when you go back to your department, it may not play out like FDIC. And we can have all these conversations and we can enjoy the traditions and we can network. But the things that we talk about at FDIC or at any training event or on social media or, in the fire service books, they don't always translate directly to your department because, for better or worse, the fire department is just different everywhere you go. It's different staffing, it's different funding, it's different equipment, it's different people. The bulk of the job is the same. Yeah, but going to a fire in West Columbia, South Carolina is not going to a fire in New York City. It's not going to play out the same. The outcomes are hopefully going to be the same, but how we get there is different. So, what I have watched in my journey on social media and what I have been a victim to in my own journey in social media is that when you put things out there in the wide audience of the fire service, it's very, very easy to find validation. It's very easy to find somebody to support your point of view and your opinion, no matter how outrageous it may be. So the example I have come to grow and love, and I got to find a new one because young people haven't seen the movie Backdraft sometimes. But if you haven't seen it, that's your homework, right? If this analogy doesn't make sense to you, go do your homework, watch Backdraft. But there's a scene in Backdraft where he walks into this big giant warehouse in his 3/4 boots and his rubber coat, and he takes a fire extinguisher off the wall, and somehow he throws the top of it off, which is weird because it should be threaded, and then he launches it into the fire like a grenade, right? Outrageous. Anybody who's been to a fire will tell you it's outrageous. But I could start promoting that on my social media as my new favorite tactic, and eventually somebody, probably a fake account, would get on there and agree with it and roll with it and send it out there. And now all of a sudden, people who don't know any better or people who just want to be in with the following, they're going to start promoting that. And so that's so dangerous to me. But I think we have to learn, we have a responsibility to take these bigger messages and how do they integrate into your department? And I spent way too long in my career trying to force people into these ideas that they just weren't interested in. And what I learned through that was that I wasn't wrong by any stretch of the imagination a lot of the time, but my approach was 100% wrong. And it was because I started to see the bigger fire service and I lost sight of my fire department.
Mm.
And so I really, in the second, this next part of my career, have worked a lot harder to try to figure out how that works. So I'll give you an example, right? When I was on the rig as a captain, I did things a certain way. It was Mark's way. I always check off my own air pack because that's just something I believe in, because I don't want anybody to have to tell my family that, oh, I don't know, I checked it for him this morning, I think it was full, but I don't know if it was full, blah, blah, blah. When we packed hose, I did not let any aid companies or neighboring departments pack our hose. That's our hose. That's our weapon. We pack it. It's not to be disrespectful to people. Again, we're not going to blame Engine 75 down the road that they packed our line wrong, because we pack it. And part of that was making sure the stripes are lined up and having a little pride and this and that. That was just how I did business. Now, the guy who replaces me may not do it that way. And that's okay, right? But how he builds up his culture in that company, how he builds his company pride, how he builds his leadership may not match mine. So I can't go around and tell everybody the way Mark did it is the way to do it, right? I can promote that in the bigger fire service. Like I say, these are some things that have worked for me. These are concepts that I take from the military, from sports, from mentors, and this is how I package them. And those ideas still play true, but how you package them or how Preston package them might be different. And so that's where I say you got to learn to go to these classes, to read these blogs, to read these books, and then make an effort to say, okay, well, how does that fit my staffing? How does that fit our budget? How does that fit the way we operate? Because a lot of departments operate a certain way. And I got news for you. Unless you're the fire chief or the operations chief, you probably don't have the juice to change things that drastically in your department. So, I can't remember where I heard it. It was recently. Somebody was talking about operating inside the box, and most people don't even know what the box looks like. It might have been you. I can't remember. But that's the thing, right? We need to learn how to operate inside that box. And the first step of that is understanding what the box is. So I just caution people, when you get on the internet, when you go to a class, when you go to a conference and you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to change me. It's going to change my department. Like, that's true. But you can't just blindly bring it back, throw it on the kitchen table and expect everybody to flock to it like you just threw free steak on the table. It's not going to go that way.
That's crazy, because I've said this for a while, and I've had this thought, like, once I got like really involved in social media and like caught myself getting a little bit of internally caught myself being a little bit like egotistical about my social media presence, if you will. I don't know how to explain that, but I've said this for a while. It's just like, okay, hypothetically speaking, I can go be the keynote speaker at FDIC and I can gain tons of influence from firefighters around the country. But if the guys I live with hate me, or I'm not making a change or have any influence at my home department, like what does any of this matter? And so There's two things that I've realized is like one or two things you can't not necessarily teach, but two things you can't force. And that's brotherhood and traditions. And FDIC is an awesome place to go to because you have both of those things, right? One of the ways I explained FDIC to guys that asked me about it is like, it gave you, I know this is terrible. It gave you an excuse to be a fireman. Like, I mean that. It gave you an excuse to enjoy the pipes and drums. It gave you an excuse to wear fire department t-shirts and like go out and like just be a fireman, right? And I don't know another way to explain that, so hopefully it lands well, but it really did. It just gave you an excuse. But I cannot go back and force those things on my department. That's not going to work. I think by now, maybe, hopefully, that there's enough people, Preston included, that talk about going to conferences and coming back and bringing that information back to your department where people kind of have the tactics and the way you operate down. But that's another thing that like you get a dose of at conferences that honestly, you just can't go back and replicate that at home. That has to be bred. That goes back to the first conversation we had at the beginning of this. That goes back into building up that culture differently. And if you want to do that, it takes a long time to do that. But the finding where these classes and conferences work in your department, what I've realized amongst other things and being taught by mentors and just the fire service in general is like, I think that like, and let's just take nozzle forward. I feel like the majority of the fire service knows what nozzle forward is. There are things that the cadre of nozzle forward does that just don't translate well to my department. The majority of it does, but not all of it. You know what I mean? For staffing reasons or whatever. Like one way or another, we're not going to have a backup guy on the line. Like for whatever reason it might be. We try to, and that's what we hope to get, but maybe we won't. And so some of the things that we do, we might have to do them just a completely different way, which kind of goes back to the outcomes conversation. It's all integrated. But figuring out like those key points that will translate back to your department, that's what's big. Because the moment, and I know we've probably all experienced this, the moment that you might tell them 90% of the information, they're like, man, that's going to work. That's going to be awesome. We can do that here. The moment you say that one thing that's not going to work at your department, they just like, oh, I'm out. And everything else you just said lost credibility. And so it's up to you as a fireman to come back and realize what that is and be able to, tell them about that in a literate way. I'm trying to be smart and I can't. Just tell them the way what would work.
Well, nozzle forward is such a great example too, because I've been a nozzle forward twice, and as passionate and as bought in as I am to the mechanics of the tactics of that class, I tell everybody the best part of that class is Aaron's classroom part,
100%.
where he talks about how to learn, where he throws simple things at you, like a building is either wider than long, longer than wide, or a square, and all the big buildings are just those pieces, but like little things that like you knew it already, but nobody ever spelled it out for you to know it, and it comes so. That's why I laugh where people, oh, yeah, you put a lot of fires out in the parking lot. Like, I get it, bro. But not everybody has a $5 million training building to go advance hose in. We got what we got. But again, I took more out of that class. A, Aaron's classroom part, and B, the mentorship of his cadre is just second to none.
100%.
And so, that kind of even dovetails back to like the culture of the fire service versus the fire department too. Is that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that just because we have a platform, just because somebody allowed me to come speak at their fire department, their conference, do you not think that there are people in fire departments that have never heard of Firefighter Nation or Mark Aloan or Preston Light? Do you not think there's people in fire departments that are literally paying it forward every day, making their people better, having influence, doing good things, teaching good tactics that have never been to outside training? Yeah, there are. And that's okay. So just because again, just because you go to a conference or a class, like I think everybody should go to gain perspective. That's what I think. Whether you take anything out of what I have to say in my class or not, just the perspective you'll get from being around other people or hearing somebody else is invaluable. But again, I'm not better than anybody else because I've been afforded so many wonderful opportunities to have some influence. I'm not the only, I go back to the country's huge, right? Do you think that Mark Aloan is the only person in the fire service of the United States of America that has come to the conclusion that they would like to start with outcomes and work their way backwards? Like, that's not proprietary. I'm not a genius. I'm not, so that's where I say too, just there's kind of ego is the word you used. I think there's kind of a celebrity component at some point And just understand that most people, like, you make a choice to come out here and have a voice, right? You make a choice to have a platform. Not everybody wants to make that choice. Either they don't like to talk like this, they're uncomfortable on camera, or they don't feel like they have something to offer. But that doesn't mean that those people aren't making, waves in their own department on the same level. So,
one thing that I have found in my personal career, my professional career, that's been kind of dangerous, going out to outside trainings, going to conferences and networking with firemen. And like you said, John, it was an excuse to be a fireman at FDIC, listen to the pipes and drums and all these inspirational people. But you know what stigma that exists at outside conferences and trainings is the lack of love for EMS. And honestly, right, we laugh, we smirk. John and I have an inside joke about it that happened at FDIC, but I used to tell people before conferences that I'm a firefighter paramedic. I ride the box every 6 months out of the year, and that's the majority of calls in my department. Same thing we hear all the time, right? Where we run the majority of EMS and we occasionally go to fires, right? That was the things that I said before going to outside trainings. Now, after going to conferences, I don't tell people I'm a paramedic. It's actually frowned upon to be a paramedic when you go to firefighter conferences. They're like, oh God, seriously? Like, it's weird.
I tell them,
dude, it's weird though, right? It's a stigma that is kind of dangerous, because now I'm not afraid to say it. I kind of hate EMS, and that's a majority of my job. And now I look at it completely different because of going to outside trainings where there's so much joy and pride and ownership at these conferences. But that is one stigma I'm struggling with right now.
I said this at this is like the joke, right? But it's not a joke. I mean this. And after talking with Rob Fisher, maybe it's just territorial or regional, but some of the best firemen that I know personally are also some of the best paramedics that I know. I personally think that, and not saying that people that don't ride an ambulance aren't professional, but I really do think that that's the professionalism part of it, is their mindset towards the work itself, right? It doesn't matter what rig they're riding that day. It could be an engine, it could be a truck, it could be an ambulance. The way you approach your job, because that's what you signed up for, right? I knew my department ran an ambulance when I signed up for it, right? Like, I knew it. So the way I approach that has to be the same. Now, saying that, do I like riding the engine more than the ambulance? Absolutely. But I still like riding the ambulance. I'm going to be very happy one day when I'm able to say I never have to get on an ambulance again. But like in the meantime, like, that's what we do. And it doesn't matter if you're on an ambulance or a fire engine, like, you're still there to provide patient care for people. The only difference is some of them might have more capabilities than others, and you don't have to go to the hospital. Like, EMS should, whatever. We don't have to get into that.
I'm going to give you a short blurb. Otherwise, we'll be talking for 15 days about this, right? The problem with EMS is that, one, a lot of people that don't have EMS experience have been allowed to start a narrative about EMS being what's wrong with the fire service. Okay. I've worked on an ambulance full-time as a part-time job voluntarily, I learned a lot of stuff working on an ambulance. I learned a lot of stuff about communicating with people. I learned a lot of stuff about the community. I learned a lot of stuff about how to work independently, because you're in the back of that box by yourself a lot of the time having to make decisions. I would also argue that, thankfully, just because of the way fires go, most of us have probably saved a lot more lives in the medical environment than we have in a fire environment. So if you're going to go on in this blurb about how you're here to serve the community and save lives, oh, well, only lives that are on fire? Is that right? Is that what I'm getting out of this? And again, it's not as glamorous. It's not. And honestly, the bigger issue is that EMS is a broken system. It's fueled by insurance. It's fueled by profit margins. And again, I'm not going to go way down this path. I'm not the best person. I don't have a PhD in, EMS economics. But I offer the point of, for people smarter than me, I actually got a guy, I said this on another show, and he messaged me, and we've been talking. He's trying to pull some data for me, but it's also quality versus quantity. The bulk of the EMS runs that we're running, how does that compare to the false alarms we run? Because I got news for you. A BS 2 a.m. med run is not any less impactful on my sleep than a BS fire alarm at 2 a.m. So what is the difference? And again, if you don't like EMS, that's fine. I don't really care. But I also bet you there's a lot of people that still like to be on a fire engine. They still like to go to fires, but would actually prefer to ride the ambulance if, to your point, Preston, they weren't going to get made fun of for it every time. Why would you make fun of that person if you didn't like the ambulance? You're my best friend, bro. I don't like the ambulance. You like the ambulance. Let's make a deal. I'll ride the engine. You ride the box. We'll run to the calls together. And who cares?
Chief, just pick up your microphone and just drop it. We can we can end it.
Yeah.
I'll say this, and then we can move on from the EMS conversation. At least in my organization, like riding the ambulance has its perks. I love my captain to death. He's awesome, but I don't have to deal with being with a crew. We can go do whatever we want to do. And the most important part is we fight fire off the ambulance. We got a hook. Yes. We have a set of irons. We have our air packs. We have a water can. Not saying that we do this every day, but like we have the ability to show up first on scene of a fire and bury off into it without an engine company behind us if we get there fast, in the perfect scenario, obviously. Don't take my words out of context. So, and then at the end of the day, like, hey, there's EMS calls waiting, and have fun packing up, guys. We'll see you back at the house. You know what I mean? Like, we'll have the coffee ready for you. But anyways, okay, we're probably not getting to all of our topics, but I really want to get into this, okay? And I think this is going to be two-parted. I really wanted to hear this. It says the expectations of leaders versus the leadership positions. You sent that to us. I want to get into talking about that, and then maybe if we can talk on a little bit, kind of get into, because it overlaps, the leadership versus followership conversation.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I have an issue with a lot of the leadership conversation because it doesn't come with good perspective. It's really easy to throw your fire chief under the bus. It's really easy to throw your battalion chief or your company officer under the bus when you do not have the experience and understanding of what their job is, and you don't have a real understanding of how the fire department fits into the bigger municipal government system. And so what I mean by that is, the fire chief 100% steers the organization for better or worse. Are there bad fire chiefs out there? Yes, absolutely. Are there great fire chiefs out there? 100%. But there's also great fire chiefs that are handcuffed by funding, by politics, by elected officials, by other division directors that are taking all the attention or influence, right? Or, have a higher priority. That's life. I don't believe that there's a high percentage of fire chiefs that show up to work every day and are like, how can I screw my guys over today? Like, that's my goal today. How can I mess up their day? How can I interject in a way that makes them not have fun at work, blah, 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 blah. So the flip side of that is that, and I'll cite, I think it was right after COVID, it was out west somewhere. There was a Facebook story. I think I even shared it at the time because I think it's cool. But it was a fire chief, I think out in California somewhere, that essentially rode the box for a day. He got on an ambulance so that his guy could have a day off or somebody didn't have to ride it. Staffing was low. And it was, oh, this guy's great. Look at this. This is what leadership looks like, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, 100% true. But what do you know about that fire chief beyond that Facebook article? What would his guys say about him? You get what I'm saying? And again, I'm not saying this guy's a bad guy. I don't take it that way. I don't know. I don't know the answer. But I also know that there's plenty of people that teach classes. There's plenty of social media stories about all these great leaders. And then I've come across a few in my time where if you go talk to people that work for them, like, yeah, well, I remember when Mark was fireman, Mark, and I promise you he wasn't about that life. And he doesn't talk about that part. That's why I'm very careful about what I say. I'm trying to be very humble. Like there's plenty in my career that I am not proud of at all. I'm not going to promote it as like, hey, this is what I want to talk about. But I tell people in the beginning of every class, everything I say today, I say with the assumption, and even doing this, that you will call somebody from my fire department and ask them if I'm about the things I say I'm about. Because if I'm not, I hope that they tell me that. I hope if I said something today that is not what I'm about, when I go back to work for my next shift on Sunday, that my guys say, hey, we listened to your podcast. What are you talking about? And then I got some soul searching to do, right? Or I need to straighten out with them why it is that way. So I say that to go back into the original question of what do we expect of leaders? So we expect that every time something goes wrong, the company officer or the chief officer is going to go into their boss's office, slam the door shut, pound their fist on the desk and say, either you fix it or I'm out, right? That's, you need to lay down for your guys. You need to, blah, blah, blah. And that's true. but it doesn't look like that in reality. Because if I do that at work, if I were to go in my fire chief's office tomorrow, and my fire chief, as far as I know, likes me, we have a great relationship. But if I walked in his office tomorrow, busted the door down, said, sit down and listen to what I have to say. We're done with A, B, C, and D because the guys aren't going to deal with it anymore. And if you don't fix it right now, you can forget about me working here. You know what he's going to tell me?
Bye.
Go get your shit. Right?
Yep.
Have a good day. So it's really easy to say that when it's not your butt on the line. It's really easy to say that when it's not your mortgage, your kids that are going to suffer from that. Now, there is a time and a place for that. Don't get me wrong. Like when you company officer to a point, but really when you start putting on those chief positions, like there may be a time where you have to go into an office and be prepared to get fired, but that's not because you don't want to turn fire hydrants for maintenance, or you don't want to pre-plan buildings, or you don't want to ride the ambulance. Like, I'm not sacrificing my career over that. Like, I'll have that conversation in a staff meeting. I may win, I may lose, but it's going to be something like, our guys are in danger and you are refusing to do anything about it. And I am not going to be on board with this anymore. And but I also have to be fully prepared for my boss to say, cool, then you have a choice. You can either get on board or you can get out. Now, think about that amplified outside of the fire department, right? Like, that sounds like doom and gloom. That sounds like it's pretty outrageous. But now take the fire chief that's going down to City Hall with an elected official asking for funding or a piece of equipment or better facilities or whatever it is, all the things that we get so mad about. And when the mayor or the city administrator or county manager, whatever, says, no, we're not doing that, what are they supposed to say? You know what I'm saying? Like, these people are elected. Like, you don't mess with them like that, but they can 100% get you hired or fired. So I just think that we have this very unicorn expectation, Hollywood expectation of the fire chief that shows up, slides onto the apron in his chief car, gets out in his Class A's with lightning bolts flying everywhere. He walks into the mayor's office, says, blah, 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 blah. And the mayor's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you came here, fire chief. Yes, whatever you need. Like, it's like that Rocky Balboa approach to leadership. And I'm sorry, that is not how it works out. The other side of that is that if that is your unrealistic expectation for your bosses, what are you doing that you deserve that kind of representation? Are you coming in and checking your stuff off every day? Are you getting your training in? Are you producing good results? Are you solving problems? Are you helping out? Or are you just sitting there with your legs up in the day room complaining about everything that's wrong with the place while you take zero responsibility for it, but then you think that your boss is supposed to surrender their career for you? Like, that's where I lose my mind with it. And I can say that because when I was young, that's what I expected. And I probably didn't do my part every time to have that expectation.
I love the fact that you opened that up with we want to see the fire chief come ride the box for a day, put on bunker gear, run through the JPA or the agility test. And that way he earns respect from his people. Like, we always expect to see the upper echelon come down to our level. But like what you kind of ended with is like, okay, are you just chirping away at the kitchen table or the recliner? What are you doing to get up to that level? What are you doing are you coming up to their level to fix problems? Or are you just staring up at the glass palace saying, fix all of our shit while I sit here? Probably shouldn't have cussed, but fix all our stuff while we're here. You know what I mean? We want everything. We want the command staff to do everything for us. But at what point are we going to meet them halfway?
Well, and so your example is great. Like, I think it is great messaging as, especially when you get to the administrative side, I think, but even on the operational, higher up positions, like, I think it's good messaging to come out and do the CPAT to say that, hey, we as the leadership of this organization are committed to fitness. So we are going to hold ourselves to the same accountability as you, right? It's just like the military, right? The standard may change as you get older. Even the military is like that. But hey, we're still going to come out and run it. Now, I would hope that the younger, people in the department smoke me, as a fire chief of 40 years on. But yeah, I think that is good messaging. I think it's important. However, if your fire chief does not do the CPAT every year, it does not mean they're a bad fire chief, right? And I can honestly tell you, like, I really try to get out and train with my guys. But what I had to learn, too, that I don't think I really appreciated as a company or as a new chief, actually, when I was a company officer, if my chief showed up all the time, I felt like I was doing something wrong. So we have this two-sided thing, right? We want the brass to have some, appearances with us, but then when they show up, we're like, oh crap, what did we do wrong now? And part of that is because if you're only showing up when something is wrong, you've created that narrative. But part of it is that's just the folklore of firefighters. I can tell you that I try to go out there and mask up when I can still. I'm still averaging under 20 seconds as a battalion chief, right? Like that. I take a lot of pride in that because I really believe in that. And I believe in setting the example. But my crews know that just because I'm not out there for every training session doesn't mean that I'm, disconnected or I don't appreciate it or I don't want to be a firefighter. So yes, I want the mentality in my bosses that, man, I really still want to be on the truck, with the understanding that I'm advocating and working for you in ways that I can't do if I'm with you for every training, every PT session, every run. I just tell you straight up, I just spent my last 48-hour shift literally trying to fix MDTs in the truck because we installed an update and it started doing weird stuff. Now, I could have gone out there and done some RIT training with them. Absolutely. But my role now is that I need to give them the tools to be successful, and the information that comes across from dispatch is valuable to them. So do you think that's what I wanted to do? No, I had a whole other plan for stuff I was going to do. But I feel it's my job as a leader to take all of my responsibilities and put them first, because those responsibilities affect my men. Right. Yeah. And that's where I come from with that. The other side of that too is that there is definitely, and if you've never experienced it, and I have only half experienced it because I'm still in operations, but once you come off the rig, your skill level declines, right? And I'm still teaching stuff, like I'm ahead of the curve, but do you really want your fire chief who's been in an office for 5 years to suddenly pick up a shift on a rig and put his gear on and go into a fire with you? Like, he's going to be your probie in many ways if you really think about it. And it's a lot easier in a smaller organization, right? Can you imagine being a fire chief of 50 firehouses and 1,000 something people, and you're supposed to know every single one of them, and you're supposed to know about their families, and you're supposed to come out to every training and ride calls? When are you getting your job done? Like, that position still has a job. So again, I want a firefighter's chief, to me, is a chief that has the mentality of a firefighter. The decisions they make, the purchases they make, the stuff that we're speccing out, our tactics, our policies, come from the mentality of somebody that knows what it's like to be on the rig and is making decisions to make sure the people on the rigs have what they need to be successful. It's not somebody who comes out and dresses up as a fireman once a week. That's not the same thing.
You took everything that I was going to say right there at the end away from me. I don't even say it. Because that is the other side to it. Like, if we had a chief that was out working out with us every day, training with us every day, like, what are we going to complain about then? The chief's around too much, right? Yep. And when does he have time to do his job, right? The other part that I really like that you said is, and it reminded me of that, the book, The Mission, The Men, and Me. Like, as long as the fire chief is accomplishing like his job as the fire chief, right? And he listens to the guys, the boots on the ground, and empowers the right people in the right places to make sure those things are getting done. Like, that's all we really need. Is it nice if you have a personable relationship with the fire chief? Yes. But like you said, that's realistic when you talk about these large departments. There's no way that one person is going to know every single fireman's name, right? It's almost realistic at my department, but it's not. There's about 170 guys there. That's still a lot of people to know. And so I totally get both sides of it. But at the same time, like you said, Chief, like, I want him to make decisions that are in the best interest of the guys on the ground that are actually doing as long as he doesn't lose sight of that, like, I think everything's good.
Well, and I think some people too that needs to be put out there is that, I'm not a fire chief. I preface all the time. I'm a battalion chief, right? I'm somewhere, I'm like the upper middle management position, but communication always comes up with this. And you can't always tell people things. That's the thing. And it's like, oh, there's all these secrets and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, there is to a point, and there are a lot of people who could be better about sharing information. However, if I go into a meeting with my boss, who went into a meeting with his boss, who happens to be an elected official, and we tried to get A, B, and C, and we couldn't do it. Okay. So now we come back, and what does the floor want? They want to know, well, who said no and why did they say no? I can't do that. I can't throw an elected official under the bus because they said no to us. I can't make them look bad, because that 45,000 people on social media are going to know about it by the time we leave the kitchen table and we told them that. And I think that we create that disconnect ourselves from the floor. And I say it from a place of experience. We all want to know everything. I don't know what it is about the fire department, but we got to know. We got to know. We got to know. Well, again, worry about your job first. What you need to know from the floor level is your district, your skill level, the people you work with, buildings in your area, blah, 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 blah. It is nice to know. And I try to share as much as I can with my people. I really do. And sometimes they'll ask things and I'll just say, next question. And that's my way of saying, hey, I can't talk about that. It's not because you can't handle it. It's not because you're incapable of digesting it in a positive way. It's just because there are some things that come with, as you get higher up the ladder, that you just can't talk about. And that's life. I can't talk about why somebody got fired. It's dangerous, right? I could fire Preston tomorrow. He can tell everybody his side of the story and none of mine. And I guarantee you, he's going to look like a victim and I'm going to be the aggressor, even though he was the one that came in and told me where I could shove it, right? Got his way out the door. Yeah. But, it just comes with a position. And that's why I say, if you want to say these things, understand the perspective that you're talking about. And unfortunately, really, unless you've experienced in some way, shape, or form, sometimes you just can't have that perspective. You got to take our word for it.
And as firemen, I think we all want our hand in the honeypot, like all the time. Like especially like I had a conversation with a buddy yesterday who's just frustrated with the way some of the things at his department are being handled, from, promotional processes to standards and accountability and this, that, and another. And I finally asked him, like, okay, like, what can you directly affect there? And he's like, well, I'm, part of some committees here and there. And I was like, well, that part's unfortunate. If your department takes the time to put committees together and then doesn't value their opinion, that does suck. And I do understand that. But I go back to this, and it's something that I feel like we all have to remind ourselves of, especially when we're not in leadership positions, but like what you were saying, like the administrative chief level, like you have to control the controllables and focus on your circle of influence. As a company officer, that's you and what your crew does on the day in and day out. Go even further than that, or smaller than that, as a tailboard fireman, like that's you, bro. Like that's you, your skill set and what you control, right? And I reminded him, like, that viral video that Basil put out, where he's at a conference speaking, and he's like, if they're not going to hold the standard, we are. And that's the mentality that you have to have from every level. If you're a company officer, if your battalion chief's not going to hold a standard, guess what? You can hold a standard for you and your company, right? Your tailboard fireman, if your company officer's not going to hold a standard, you can as a tailboard fireman. It's just who you influence is going to be directly related to you and your, level of influence there. So,
and everybody wants the standard when they're the one holding it.
Exactly.
But when it's being applied to you, all of a sudden it's, he's unreasonable. It's too much, blah, blah, blah. So,
we like standards. We like standards until standards and is paired with accountability.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, oh man. All right. Well, Chief, I think we're coming up a little bit past an hour now. We didn't even get through a lot of what we were talking about, but I still feel like this is a good place to end it. I know that at some point we can have you back on again. And then respectively on Preston and I's, single platforms. I think that would be awesome to have you back on there. So before we go though, Chief, can you tell the people just where to find you, how to get a hold of you? If they want to schedule anything with you, just let them know how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, sure. So on Facebook, it's The Fire Inside. I think it's, Facebook / The Fire Inside page. It's the same thing on Instagram with the little @ thing. I don't do good with Instagram. I tried a little hashtags. It doesn't seem to help my following. My more mature perspective doesn't seem to resonate as much either. I get a lot less likes and shares, but I try on that. I have a website, thefireinside.org. I'm trying really hard to get on there and kind of update it. I've had a lot at work lately, so I'm a little behind on that stuff. You can email me, mark@thefireinside.org. I know a lot of these guys give out their phone numbers. I get too many of these weird robocalls, so I don't answer numbers I don't know, so it's kind of counterproductive. But if you message me on one of those platforms or send me an email and you want to hook up, I'll send you my info. We can talk. So I also teach with the Rust Belt Jakes cadre. We travel around. We do some hands-on stuff, also on social media as well. So look that up. And then other than that, just the people who know me, they can hook you up with my personal contact information. So I'm cool with that too. If you're in the circle, then obviously I'm cool with that. So
awesome. Preston.
Yeah, we let them get away with not talking about followership, so we'll let them slide.
I know. That might be a different time. That might be a different time.
We'll bring them back on for sure.
If that's the case, we would have hit the 2-hour mark. So this is being respectful to everybody that has to listen. For sure. So Anyways, Mark, Chief, thank you so much for coming on here, Firefighter Nation. Thank you for being on the Revolutionaries. Guys, we're going to see you next month. We're going to continue to pump out some pretty good guests and talk about truly making an impact. So make sure you guys check in. Make sure you're subscribing to Firefighter Nation. Go check out all the articles that a bunch of great people have written and all their content on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. Just make sure you check them out and their website. So other than that, we'll see you guys next month.
See ya.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Remove carcinogens and get your gear compliant clean with Unimac laundry equipment. Find it at alliancelaundry.com/fire.